Welcome, everybody. This is Bill Condon and Matt McGregor. Welcome to our 13th podcast episode. Today's topic will be the current state of the supply chain. And we're fortunate to have as a guest again, Todd Steffen, who is the Vice President of Supply Chain Consulting at Colliers and widely considered one of the top thought leaders in the entire supply chain industry. And if you remember, we had Todd on about 3 weeks ago to discuss the impact the coronavirus has had on the supply chain. And a lot has changed in the 3 weeks since we've had him on. So Todd, I think that's a really good place to start. Why don't we start with that? What's different between now and 3 weeks ago as it relates to the supply chain?
Hey, Bill, glad to be with you both, you and Matt. Thanks for having me back. That's a great question. And boy, quite a bit's changed. Just to remind us, it seems like forever ago, but just to remind us of where we were at 3 weeks ago. You know, we had great momentum in Q1 leading into the COVID-19 pandemic situation from a supply chain standpoint and really an industrial real estate momentum standpoint, driven largely by supply chain. We had great resiliency. I think so far through the COVID-19 pandemic, as a result of that momentum that we had coming in from Q1. Obviously, we were dealing at the time 3 weeks ago with the effect of a drop in supply availability from China, and factories were just coming back online, and folks were getting back into those factories. I think at this point now, we've had a massive shift in that the supply is available in the global supply chain, but the demand from the Western sector has essentially tailed off in large parts, and it's really a tale of two sectors. Grocery, food, and medical are roaring and raging ahead, occupying a lot of the industrial capacity, current and growth. And then also you have just a really a drying up of apparel and furniture and anything service related, inventory that relates to the service industries. So just within the last 3 weeks, you've seen a massive shift in a lack of from a lack of supply to a lack of demand. That lack of demand has resulted in many blank sailings from Asia. And essentially a lack of passenger airline travel as well.
Hey, Todd, what do you mean by blank sailing?
Yeah, sorry, man. So blank sailings, when I say blank sailings, essentially the ocean liners have decided to skip certain scheduled shipments on their schedule. Okay. So because at first the supply wasn't there and now the demand's not there. The other big shift that's happened in the last few weeks is that the airliners that used to carry passengers up top and then cargo in the belly, those airline trips have stopped, and therefore UPS, FedEx, United Airlines, American Airlines have all now started cargo only, air freight shipments. And I should say, American and United have started cargo only. Obviously, UPS and FedEx have had to add to their capacity. So those are some of the big things that have changed within the last three weeks. Obviously, the way the supply chain operates in the U.S. has drastically changed as well. Bill, back to your question. And essentially, I was on with 12 top retail DC operations leaders the other day on a call. And the way they run their DC operations and supply chains have drastically changed, right? Everything from temperature checks at the door for all employees to social distancing within their facilities, pay hikes and incentives to keep the folks coming back to work, deep cleanings in between shifts, and as we saw before, a massive shift to e-commerce underway, even accelerating more so than before.
And Todd, you mentioned that obviously with the drop in supply, we've noticed a huge surplus of temporary storage needs to the point where one well-known sports shoe company is looking for 5 million feet for overflow storage. Is that just because the malls are all shut? Talk to us about that, about just this massive need for temp storage.
Yeah, Matt, great question. So I'm seeing it as well. I have one client in the market for 800,000 square feet of seasonal, short-term, 1 year, 12 to 18 month storage in the Southeast. And essentially what happened was that the change came upon us so quickly in the lack of demand and stores shutting down and that kind of thing, that those orders that were made to Asia, a few months ago couldn't be stopped. And essentially that inventory was on its way. It hit the port, and then, it has to go somewhere. It usually goes through a cross dock or a transload facility to then move on to the retailer's DC. Well, the retailer's DCs serving brick and mortar in some cases are either at a greatly reduced operating capacity or closed altogether. And those retailers have shifted all their labor and capacity over to e-commerce fulfillment, and that brick and mortar inventory has to go somewhere. So essentially the short-term storage requests are skyrocketing as a result of that.
Let's stay on the e-commerce topic for a second. We've obviously seen a huge acceleration there. How do you think e-commerce is going to be affected into the future moving forward?
Yeah, Bill, great question. Without a doubt, this is going to be the single greatest accelerative catalyst for e-commerce growth in the U.S. and therefore have a direct impact on the acceleration of conversion of industrial capacity. So I think that now, the baby boomers and those that maybe are even older than baby boomers that were hesitant to get online for whatever reason and do a certain amount of purchasing are now exclusively doing purchasing online, including grocery delivery. So I think you're seeing a doubling and tripling of the pace of change now, and I don't think that's going to go back to business as normal for those brick and mortar retail organizations. So the ones that were ahead of the game, shifting to e-commerce and staying ahead of consumer demand, are going to thrive, and their supply chains will continue to accelerate evolution. And those that did not get on board with the e-commerce, trend in a big way are going to be left out.
Todd, I couldn't agree with you more on that. I know that in the U.S., we were averaging about 11% of all retail sales were e-commerce through 2019, with a peak record level in December of 19, just a few months ago, at 14.6% of all sales in December retail related were online in the U.S. Versus brick and mortar. In comparison, in that same time span in 2019, if you combine China and Korean retail sales of 2019, 44% were online versus just about 11% in the U.S. So it seems like, to your point, not only were we behind, but we've got a long way to go. You think of, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like every day I come home and I've got a stack of Amazon boxes at my house. But boy, the U.S. is really behind. And to your point, Todd, this is really going to accelerate it.
Man, I couldn't agree more. And if you think about where China, for example, hit with regards to e-commerce percentage of total sales during COVID-19, when their retail was shut down in large part, it hit over 60%. And so if you think about it, they hit a peak of 60% and came back to that 44% number that you mentioned. I think the same thing's going to happen here. If we peaked at 14 at the end of 19 in December, up from an average of 11, I could easily see us getting to double that number very quickly, depending on the duration of this situation. And as a result, I don't think it's gonna ease back much toward brick and mortar.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And one thing we probably should have noted at the beginning of this call, we're all in quarantine like everybody else, and so this is our first podcast that we're all dialing in for. So we apologize for the audio quality of this, as this is the first time we're all in separate locations. And in fact, this is the first time I've seen Bill in a few weeks. I can see him online here. And Bill, I think you're cheating. It looks like you're somehow you got a barber going on, because your hair just looks great.
Yeah, well, I'm keeping it clean. I'm not letting it grow out like a lot of people. I got to keep it clean.
That's right. Yeah. Well, back to supply chain. So, Todd, with the change in demand, and you got all of this freight still coming in here, let's talk about the freight, ocean, air, and over the road. So we got all this freight moving without people buying it. Update us on the movement of freight.
Boy, that's another thing that's really changed in the last few weeks. So as I mentioned, passenger air trips have stopped basically, internationally in large part, and therefore the cargo that went in the belly of those flights now had to find another route. So American and United have, like I said, started cargo-only flights. However, I just heard this morning, I was on an international supply chain leadership call, and I just heard that flights are being controlled for all medical-related items by the Chinese government now, and there's a kind of a political scuffle going on between China and Hong Kong, and the flights out of Hong Kong are being highly regulated with anything having to do with medical devices or equipment or masks, gowns, that kind of thing. So just something to be aware of, that's a particular sector specific situation, but basically China's using their control of all the medical related response gear to this pandemic and for political reasons. I did see it's interesting. I saw France ordered. I think they put in an order for 1 billion N95 masks, and at the last minute, this just came out as well. At the last minute, before those masks were going to ship to France, I guess the U.S. swung in while the masks were on the tarmac and put down cash to 3 or 4x the amount of the French payment, and basically took the masks out from under the French, and those masks are now on their way to the U.S. So it's an incredibly fluid, dynamic situation. With regards to ocean, as I mentioned, there are blank sailings to the U.S. and U.K. based on deferred demand or really demand that won't materialize. And then U.S. domestic over-the-road transportation has just been decimated with this lack of demand as well. Less than truckload shipments are way down. And really the only thing that's buoying the transportation sector from a truckload standpoint is grocery and medical and COVID-19 response, and obviously all the parcel that is shipping. So parcel, 3PL, medical, and grocery are really what's going on in the transportation, U.S. domestic transportation sector.
Yeah, Todd, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but distribution center operations have obviously been greatly impacted in how they operate. What are the biggest adjustments that you have seen in the way that DCs are operating these last couple of weeks?
Great question, Bill. I think the main things that I've noticed are that obviously the employee safety, which was always a top priority for operators, is now just so much more pronounced, because as soon as there's an outage, it can affect the whole facility, which is so different than before. So now there's temperature checks at the door. There's social distancing going on, and very specific procedures around temperature checks and what to do as a result of certain outcomes. And then, contracts are already in place to fully clean the DC, deep clean the DC, and disinfect the DC if contamination is found. And these could take 2 to 3 days for a 500,000 square foot facility to do the deep cleaning. There's social distancing going on within the facility, of course, in the break areas and cafeterias. Chairs are being removed, so everybody's 6 feet apart at all times. The training going on for folks in the DCs is all virtual in a lot of cases now, so there's not a direct contact with a trainer and a trainee at the same workstation. And as I mentioned before, essentially the operations are being restructured so that safety is the primary priority in a whole new way now, and that includes restructuring the DCs and as far as where employees can enter and quarantining essentially sections of the DC so that if a contamination is found in a certain section, they don't have to shut down the whole DC. So it's just an amazing shift that's happened just within days with these massive DC operations, but pretty common across the industry. What I'm seeing these changes take place.
Todd, just one last quick question. I know we hit you with this before, but from some of the basic supplies, are we getting back to somewhat normal levels of the ones that people just bum rushed in the stores, which was like toilet paper and hand sanitizer and cleaning supplies? Are those coming back online, or where are we at with those kind of essential products?
Yeah, man, I think the coming online, they were always online. Obviously, the hoarding, depleted supply. I'm seeing the major retailers take some excellent steps with regards to monitoring consumption and limiting consumption. Obviously, the retail locations that are open, like the Walmarts and Costco's and that kind of thing, have excellent programs around social distancing for customers and in checkout lines and things like that. But definitely limits on paper towels, toilet paper, any sanitizing wipes, cleaning supplies, things like that, and medical supplies are starting to keep those in stock for a longer period of time. I'm seeing grocery bounce back wonderfully and really be in stock. Again, Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, limiting the number of customers that can be in a store at a given time, making sure they prioritize older populations of folks having access to groceries, without a lot of people in the stores and that kind of thing. So I think that's all helping, and I'm seeing new supply showing up on the shelves and lasting longer.
Well, this has been great once again, Todd. We want to thank you, and hopefully when we do our next supply chain COVID-19 update in a few weeks, the majority of this will be behind us, and things will begin to start to stabilize. And obviously, you're at the forefront of that. We look forward to an additional call with you, hopefully buttoning up the top of this horrific situation that we're all dealing with. We want to thank you, Todd. This has been great. Appreciate your expertise as always, and thanks for our listeners for tuning in.
Thanks, Matt, for having me, and stay safe and healthy to you and all your listeners.
Thank you very much.
Todd.
Appreciate it.